SpongeBob SquarePants is one of the most iconic animated shows on television. And over the years, there are still some big questions that we still ask about the series to this day. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? What is the Krabby Patty secret formula? What is the definition of wumbo? And what is a gorilla doing underwater in the first place? But this time around, we are going to go into a question that not many SpongeBob fans are ready to go and fully answer. We're going to be diving deep so that once and for all, we will go and answer the ultimate question related to this show. Which character from SpongeBob SquarePants is most likely to say and this is what this video is all about, where I have a special tier list here where we shall be ranking not the best and the worst SpongeBob characters, but we will be determining them by their sailor mounts. Which ones are the most likely or the least likely to go and drop the F-bomb? And considering that as of this video, it is the 25th anniversary of SpongeBob SquarePants, a series that I consider it to be one of my favorites growing up, I figured, why don't we go and celebrate it in the way that, well, I know how to do best, or at least my personal way of celebrating 25 years of SpongeBob. Now, before I continue, I just want to go and give a big shout out to Ryan Walterson, who actually created this tier list here. And Ryan, I just want to say thank you so much. And especially with this very clean looking list with all the characters that are in JPEG. I'm sure that by the end of this, the visual aesthetic of it will be absolutely beautiful. So Ryan, thank you so much for making this list for me. And also, I just want to go and put out a big disclaimer that I am aware that over the years in SpongeBob SquarePants, there have been hundreds, and I do mean hundreds upon hundreds of characters that have appeared in the show. But I am not going to go and rank through literally every single one who has appeared in an episode of SpongeBob. I'm just going to go and stick with pretty much the core characters of the series. I'm not going to be looking upon the small one-offs who have appeared in some of the later episodes. I'm not going to go and look into any of the spin-off characters that have appeared in either Camp Coral or in the Patrick Star Show. I'm just going to go and stick with the main characters, some of the fan favorites, and the ones from the movies, or at least some of the ones from the movies. And as you could see from the list, it is still relatively small, but I'm sure that we can still have a lot of fun with the ones that we can work with. So with that all said, let us now go and actually get this list started by taking a look at our first character. And if we are going to go and begin this, we might as well and start things off with the title character, SpongeBob SquarePants himself. Now, when it comes to SpongeBob, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who's going to go and say that, well, technically, SpongeBob has said some swear words in the past. Rather it be in the episode Sailor Mouth, or they will go and bring up that Tom Kenny clip where he would do his SpongeBob voice and he would literally drop some F-bombs.
So, you know, this is the only, you know, if it wasn't for the Christmas I wouldn't work. This is the only time of the year that I work. It pisses me off. It's like, you know, I'm glad to have it, knock on wood, but mother, you know, it's like...
But in this case here, I'm just going to be looking at SpongeBob himself. Like, I'm looking into his personality, not necessarily his history if he has actually said the F word, or at least in a genuine sense. And I would argue that when it comes to SpongeBob, he is very naive. And normally, he would not be the kind of guy who would actually go and swear. And even if he would legitimately swear, he wouldn't actually go and do that on purpose. Even if he would just go with the safe ones that the residents of Bikini Bottom would go and say. Like, you know, he would say, oh, barnacles and stuff like that. But genuinely dropping the F-bomb, I just don't really see that with SpongeBob. If he actually would, he wouldn't actually know what it would mean. He would just be a bit clueless, but then if he would know, then he would understand, okay, we won't actually go and say that, or at least in terms of SpongeBob, he wouldn't go and actually say it. He just needs to be a bit more educated in order to actually understand what it means and the implications of saying that word in particular. So that is why with SpongeBob, I think, honestly, I would actually put him in the middle here. Hold on, if I can... Okay, there we go. It just takes some time for this thing to actually register that I want to put him up there. So, now, I'm not necessarily saying that he wants to if desired. I just feel like he would go and say it, but he would be kind of clueless as to what it means. Like, honestly, I'm just putting it here because it's probably likely that SpongeBob would go and say it. It's just that he wouldn't understand the implications of that word. Okay, so the next character that we have here is Patrick. And I would say that with Patrick, technically, what I said about SpongeBob would also apply to Patrick. Except in Patrick's case, I feel like he would be far more likely to actually say the F word on a regular basis, more so than SpongeBob, because with Patrick, it's not his naivete that is his problem. It's just the fact that he is very stupid. With SpongeBob, like I said before, if you would go and educate him on what that word means, then he would most likely remember to not actually go and say that. But when it comes to Patrick, even if you would go and educate him on that word, even if you would go and tell him, don't say the F word, he's gonna forget about it like a few hours later, and then the cycle is just gonna go and repeat. Now, I'm not saying that he would just regularly use the F word. He would go and use it, but like SpongeBob, he would just have no clue what that means. And again, on the episode Sailor Mouth, it's a great example of the way that he would go and use it. Just randomly burst out all those F-bombs, but not necessarily in the correct way that people would go and legitimately use it. So that's why with Patrick, I'm putting him above SpongeBob, where he wouldn't actually go and say it, but it's for sure he has said it at some point. That, yeah, he would definitely go and say it, and he will go and say it again and not even understand what that means. Or he'll never know what that means because he really is that stupid. He doesn't have any mental problems or anything like that. Patrick literally is that dumb. All right, so the next one that we have here, oh, and this is one that I'm sure many are going to be anticipating to see where I would rank or for me to go and talk about: Squidward tentacles. And I know there's going to be many of you out there who's going to say that with Squidward, he would be the one who would swear the most. He would be the one who would drop the most F-bombs because his life is just filled with misery. He would be the kind who would commonly say, F my life, because that's how unlucky that he is.
Too bad that didn't kill me.
Now, I'm not going to go and say that he is the most likely to regularly drop the F-bomb or just commonly say the F word. I will say soon enough who I consider that might actually be. But when it comes to Squidward, I feel like if he had his life in order, if his life actually goes well the way that he would like it to go, then he wouldn't go and like commonly drop the F-bomb again and again. It's just that under the circumstances that he is in, it's just that his life is just pretty bad to the point where he would have to regularly go and drop to go and express his misery. And considering the kind of luck that Squidward would have, there are going to be people who would go and tell him, hey, don't swear. Like, people would most likely scold Squidward to not swear more so than SpongeBob and Patrick, which would in return probably fuel his likelihood to actually swear. So I think in that regard, he would definitely be at the top, where he would regularly say the F word, not necessarily because he wants to or that it's just part of his vocabulary. It's just that for him, well, his life is that crappy where he would just go and repeatedly express the F word because that's how bad his life is going. And well, like you probably have seen all the memes. When you're older, you just understand how Squidward feels in life. All right, now the next up we have here is Mr. Krabs. And this is the character that I feel like out of everyone in Bikini Bottom, he is the one who would most likely drop the F-bomb on a regular basis. Because like I mentioned before, with Squidward, I feel like his likelihood of swearing is more circumstantial. It's just that those circumstances are commonly met. But with Mr. Krabs, considering that this is a man who is like the personification of greed, he would be the kind who would regularly drop the F-bomb no matter where his life is. Like, it could go really badly or it could go really well, but when money is involved, he would just go and regularly swear no problem.
Oh, my foot! What? She just put a rock in a bath! Can't you see I got a foot here?
In fact, Mr. Krabs is the kind of person that he would easily swear if you give him a nickel. And then he would go and charge you a dime if he wants to go and express the F-bomb because, well, he's just that kind of guy. So yeah, with Mr. Krabs, it's definitely an easy one. I feel like out of all of them, he's the one that I could easily see him swear with just no problem whatsoever. So yeah, I'm definitely putting Mr. Krabs right on top, like right over here. All right, so the next one we have here is going to be Plankton. And with Plankton, I feel like he's kind of similar to Squidward, where normally he would not be the kind of guy that would regularly swear. As he is an evil genius, he wouldn't necessarily be the type of person who would go and commonly drop the F-bomb, or if he would go and express some swears, he would go with some of the typical supervillain routes. Like, we have commonly heard Plankton often say things like curses and stuff like that.
Curse you, Krill!
But with Plankton, I feel like often he would break out of that evil genius character. And considering the amount of attempts that failed, where he would try to steal the Krabby Patty formula, but often his plans would get foiled, I feel like it would happen quite occasionally where he would just go and drop the F-bomb out of dismay or out of anger that just things are not going well for him and his business at the Chum Bucket. So if Squidward would be at the top, then I feel like Plankton would also be in that same position. So I'm going to go and put him up where he would also regularly say the F word, especially with the kind of temperament that he has. I mean, Plankton would often like flip his lid. He would often get angry. So I think it's pretty easy to imagine him swearing, just like with Squidward and Mr. Krabs. And speaking of Plankton, our next character is going to be his computer wife, Karen. And with Karen, honestly, considering that she's more calm and more collected than Plankton, like, she is far less likely to explode in anger compared to Plankton, I feel like she would be less likely to go and swear. But at the same time, considering that she is the wife of Plankton, I feel like Karen would still have her moments where Plankton would push her to the limit, and that she'll probably have her episodes where she would want to go and burst out the F word, where she would legitimately be that upset. But it wouldn't be all the time, and it wouldn't be as common as plankton. So in that regard, I feel like Karen would be just underneath, where she wouldn't go and say it, but I'm sure she has at some point when dealing with plankton. All right, now the next character that we have here is Sandy Cheeks, whom debatably, other than Plankton, is the most intelligent character in Bikini Bottom, where she is a super genius, but for good. And in that regard, with the kind of nature that Sandy has, even like when she would be more athletic and do some karate and stuff like that, I feel like Sandy would not necessarily be the kind who would go and express the F word or drop the F-bomb. Especially with her Texas roots, she would have a lot more different expressions that she would go and say. Like, with her Texas mind, her vocabulary is too preoccupied with so many other expressions than to just flat out say the F word.
I'll be over there faster than a barefoot jackrabbit on a hot, greasy griddle in the middle of August with
Okay, Sandy, thanks.
But then again, that's not to say that it's impossible for Sandy to go and drop the F-bomb. Considering all the chaos that would commonly happen in Bikini Bottom and often hanging out with SpongeBob and Patrick, I'm sure there are some moments when dealing with their stupidity that she would want to go and actually drop the F-bomb when she would also be pushed to the limits. But I feel like the likelihood of that would be far less likely. So honestly, just like with SpongeBob, I feel like Sandy would be right in the middle, where normally with her personality, she would never say it, but I can imagine that under the right circumstances, she would probably say the F word at some point, but they would be rare though. All right, now the next character we have here is Mrs. Puff. And I feel like Mrs. Puff is actually a very interesting case because as she is a school teacher, she has this image that she wants to go and maintain that, you know, she is this sweet lady who wants to go and educate people about driving boats all around Bikini Bottom and teaching them about safety when driving. But at the same time, considering that she would have to deal with SpongeBob, I'm sure there have been some moments where she would want to go and express the F word seriously. In fact, I would actually go as far and say that Mrs. Puff is possibly the only cartoon character where you can actually visually see when she wants to go and say the F word, but she would do something completely different in order to go and express that. Where she would want to go and drop the F-bomb, but she holds it in. But you could see when it explodes, and she would just massively expand. So every time Mrs. Puff would actually puff up, that's when she would want to go and say the F word. But instead, she would just hold it in, let that bomb just explode in her, and let that explosion actually expand her. Not to mention that Mrs. Puff has a very shady past that not many people know about. And you know that there might have been at some point where she probably had a life where she would commonly drop the F-bomb, where she would be on top of that list, no problem.
Don't ask questions you aren't prepared to handle the answer to.
But with Mrs. Puff, as she is right now, I feel like, honestly, she would be like the epitome, like the personification of being right over here. Like, she literally is the embodiment of has sworn off saying F, but has said it at some point. All right, now the next character that we have on our list is Pearl, Mr. Krabs' daughter. And considering that she is the typical teenage valley girl, I feel like she would also be the kind of character where she would definitely drop the F-bomb at some point, but it would only be with her friends. Like, she wouldn't go and actually swear in front of her father unless she wants to be scolded and be in trouble and stuff like that. But you know that with Pearl, she has a life of her own, and she would probably be with her friends and, you know, say whatever she wants and feel like she can do whatever she wants, despite the fact that, well, she's still a teenage girl. So I feel like with Pearl, she is also like with Mrs. Puff, that at some point she has absolutely said it, even though she would debatably be too young to go and say it. Like, when she's hanging out with her other teenage girlfriends, she would definitely be, like, bursting out the F-bombs here and there. It's just, under different circumstances when she would be more free. It's just, she won't with Mr. Krabs or with any of the other people in Bikini Bottom, but with her friends, for sure. So I'm putting her next to Mrs. Puff, where she has definitely said it at some point. All right, now the next one we have here is Gary, SpongeBob's pet snail. And I think this is actually an easy one to determine, considering that the only thing that Gary would say is just meow. Now, I know some people could argue that maybe there are some moments where maybe Gary would want to say the F word under some circumstances. And yeah, like, maybe there are ways that Gary would go and express that with his eyes and stuff like that. But I feel like in this case here, like, actually to go and verbally say it, I don't think it could ever happen. And yes, I am aware there have been a few episodes where we would see Gary in a different form where he would actually go and talk. But when you would see that kind of personality where we would see a legitimate speaking Gary, he would not have the kind of personality or character in which they would commonly swear. Like, we would see Gary often as this highly educated person, like debatably even more so than either Plankton or Sandy. And he would not be the kind who would use that type of vocabulary. Like, even if you give him the power to speak, he would not be the kind to go and use that. So I feel like with Gary, he will be the first entry to be in the bottom, where he legally cannot say F. Oh, hold on. My computer is going a little bit too quick. I just wanted to go one character at a time. So yeah, I know it took a little while, but funny enough, this is the first time where we have a character where we can confidently say, no, they cannot say the F word. All right, now the next character that we have here is Patchy the Pirate, SpongeBob's biggest fan. And honestly, I feel like with Patchy, it's kind of debatable if he would go and actually drop some F-bombs. Because on one hand, considering that he is a loving SpongeBob fan, that he loves anything that is SpongeBob, and that he is often the host of many SpongeBob specials, it's hard to really see him be in that jovial, happy mode where he would go and just simply drop the F-bomb. I think under normal circumstances, with the type of character that he is, I think he's just too optimistic and too joyful to actually even swear in the first place. But then again, when you add Potty into the mix, that is where you can imagine, yeah, he probably has said some swears before just to tell Potty to go and F off. I think that's the only time that I can really imagine he would go and actually swear and actually say the F word. It's when Potty would go and interrupt him or like screw him up in whatever he's doing. Like, there's probably at some point where Patchy would just go and burst into anger and just say, F off, Potty!
Help! I'm being held here against my will! Help!
I'm sure this might have happened at some point. So in that regard, I feel like with Patchy, he would actually be right over here. Like, normally, I feel like he would have the personality where he would be like, has not said F before and refuses to say it. But I feel like with Potty, he actually pushed him to be right on top, right over here. And speaking of Potty, by the way, this is a character that I honestly feel like he would both give and not give an F in the first place. Like, in terms of his attitude, he would not give an F whatsoever. He doesn't care what Patchy is doing. He just cares about his own thing. Like, he just cares about what he wants to go and get, no matter what. But he can give an F in the form of language, where he would definitely be the kind who would just go and regularly swear no matter what. In fact, I can imagine Potty would be the kind he would just drop the F-bomb just to go and mess with Patchy the Pirate. Like, even to go and mess up his intros for the SpongeBob specials, he would go and continuously drop the F-bomb. So yeah, Potty would absolutely say the F word. He would regularly say F, and he deserves a spot at the top of the list for sure. All right, now the next character that we have is someone that I'm sure we are all familiar with, but honestly have not talked about enough: the French narrator. The one who always comes in to discuss about how much time has passed or to go and establish the setting in some of the episodes. And this is the type of character that normally you always hear him being cool, calm, and collected, just enjoying the scenery of what we see within Bikini Bottom, or just telling us how long it has been, you know, in terms of the time, like 2 hours later, 3 days later, or whatever. Someone who has become, in a way, an internet sensation. Someone who I honestly feel like deserves a spot as like a meme icon, like right next to SpongeBob, Shaggy, Kermit the Frog, and Gru. Like, so, like, honestly, I feel like debatably, like, now that I mention it, the French narrator is possibly the most underrated SpongeBob character. But with that said, though, would he be the kind who would go and swear? Honestly, I feel like it would be less likely, but considering the things that do happen in Bikini Bottom, I feel like it is not impossible for him to go and swear. But hold on, actually, then again, if he would go and swear, I don't know if he would actually go and say the F word, because he is a French narrator after all. Like, he would go and probably use the common French swears, like he would say things like putain and merde and stuff like that. So I don't know if he would actually go and use the F word. Like, it wouldn't be like on top of his swearing vocabulary. So you know what? I think this is going to be the first character that I'm going to put over here that he has not said F and refuses to say it, because his top priority is being French. And if he has to swear, then he's going to use the French swear words. All right, now the next character that we have on our list is Mermaid Man. And with Mermaid Man, well, I feel like this is another easy one, considering that Mermaid Man is just a confused old man. He's a little bit like Patrick, where he doesn't necessarily know what that word means, and if he would go and say it, well, he just doesn't really know any better. He wouldn't actually know what that word would actually mean, because, well, he's just that old. Like, he really is that confused to the point where, because of his old age, his brain has been reduced to Patrick level, and, well, his memory and his comprehension skills are not as strong as what it used to be.
Oh, yes. The unshrink ray. Let's see, did you set it to Wumbo?
Now, I know there are going to be some people who might argue that maybe in his prime, in his youth, maybe he might have said it before. And honestly, I would argue, no, he would not. Because with Mermaid Man, like, back when, like, he was much younger and, like, at his prime and, like, his, in physical top form, he is, like, the lawful good superhero. He would be the kind that he would not swear because, well, it would be the wrong thing to do. Like, he is like the full, he had the full on Superman mentality, where he would, you know, he would go and save the day and help people out for truth, justice, and I guess you could say the Bikini Bottom way. But in the case of Mermaid Man, like now that he has become older, I think he's at the point where, like, he's just at the bottom where he just legally cannot say it. You know, beforehand, it used to be because, well, that's not necessarily a noble superhero thing to do. Nowadays, well, he's just completely confused to the point where he just probably wouldn't understand what an F-bomb is. And if we are going to talk about Mermaid Man, we cannot forget about his sidekick, Barnacle Boy. Now, with Barnacle Boy, I can imagine that in his past, he would not go and say it. Like, he would also be lawful good to the point where he would never go and drop the F-bomb or say any swears whatsoever, because he kind of has this morality to go and uphold as a superhero, or more specifically, the sidekick as a superhero. But in his old age, considering that he has to put up with Mermaid Man and, of course, with SpongeBob and Patrick often fanboying about them, I can imagine he would most likely commonly swear in his older age. Like, especially when his brain functions a little bit better than Mermaid Man, I think, like, it's at the point where, yeah, it could be more common. Like, he would go and regularly swear.
Mermaid Man will understand.
You're Mermaid Man, you old coot.
Now, I'm not going to go and say that he would be, like, at the same levels as either Squidward or Mr. Krabs that he would swear, but if there's going to be someone who would swear between Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, you know it's going to be the boy. So, honestly, I think it would be right over here. I'm not going to put him right at the top, but I am going to put him just under the top where it's for sure he has said it at some point. Like, he wouldn't drop the F-bomb all the time, but I'm sure he has at some point. All right, now the next one we have on our list is the Flying Dutchman, the evil spirit that haunts Bikini Bottom from time to time. And as an evil ghost, honestly, I feel like he would be the kind of character who doesn't necessarily have to go and swear. He would be the kind that, honestly, his presence and his ghostly apparition is enough to go and, like, send a message to the people in order to go and really freak people out. And especially with the fact that he was from a time that, well, dropping the F-bombs might not be necessarily as common as it would be right now. But with that said, it is not hard to go and imagine if he would actually go and swear and actually say F. Because when he is not trying to present himself as this evil ghost, he does have this casual side of him, rather it be, like, again, putting up with SpongeBob and Patrick's shenanigans and stuff like that. And in that regard, I feel like maybe there can be some moments where, like, he probably has, adapted to some of the modern stuff that's been going on, but in his own way, of course. So I can imagine maybe there can be those few instances when he's not trying so hard to be a ghost where he would go and drop the F-bomb, but those moments are probably rare. So I feel like, honestly, he would be right in the middle. You know, he would be like with SpongeBob and Sandy, where he hasn't said it, but he can if desired. I think, like, that does describe him pretty well. All right, now the next one we have on our list is King Neptune, specifically the TV version voiced by John O'Hurley. And I know that some people could probably go and argue that, yeah, maybe he would be the kind who would go and regularly swear, but honestly, maybe not that much. Mainly because he has this regal appearance that he wants to go and uphold. I mean, yeah, he is very selfish and filled with arrogance to the point where swearing could be a possibility, but he is still a king. He is King Neptune after all. And I feel like in that regards, he would probably care more about upholding an image than just regularly swear. Now, this is not to say that he would never go and swear. Like, I'm not saying he would refuse to say it, but I feel like he would try to use his presence and his royalty to go and send a message more so than to actually go and, like, use swears or drop the F-bomb. So I feel like with King Neptune, or at least with this King Neptune, he would go right in the middle. I think, like, yeah, he probably would, and I mean, he definitely could because he's King Neptune after all, but it would not be as common. All right, now the next one that we have on our list is Larry the Lobster, the beefcake of Bikini Bottom. And honestly, I feel like with Larry, he would not be the kind that under normal circumstances where he would go and swear. I feel like that would be something that I think he's a bit too laid back to be someone who would go and regularly swear or have the F word be part of his vocabulary. But with that said, considering that he is a bodybuilder, that he is someone who is obsessed with working out with and stuff like that, I'm sure that there have been at some points when lifting weights, he would go and probably drop an F-bomb or two. So I think it's like pretty circumstantial if Larry would go and actually swear. Like, he's not the kind that he would regularly go and say it, but I do feel like if you push him to his limits, especially with weights, then yeah, I'm sure like you can easily go and force it out of him. So again, I think he's going to be right in the middle where he can, if desired, if, his workouts are really that intense. All right, so the next one that we have here is the realistic fish news anchor. The one that often when you see the news in Bikini Bottom, the one who would go and say, breaking news, it's with that fish. And honestly, that I feel like is a bit hard to go and fully determine because you only see him during his work. And when he is working, he wouldn't go and actually swear because he is a professional, like he has a bit of a reputation that he wants to go and uphold or an image to go and uphold as well. So I feel like honestly, considering that he is like the personification of a news anchor on television and one of the most well-known news anchors on television in animation, I feel like, honestly, he would refuse to say it because, well, the station wouldn't let him go and say it. So I would just put him where he would just refuse to say it, honestly. And so far, it's kind of funny that so far, like, I have a section that right now is the only one that is just with realistic looking characters. I mean, like, you got all these cartoon characters except for Patchy over here. And then, like, you got this one row that's just, like, photographically realistic characters. But anyways, speaking of news anchors and people in the news, our next one is actually Perch Perkins. And I feel like with him, it's very similar to the news anchor where he is a professional, he has a job to do, and it's rare if you would catch him in the moment where he would be in a situation where he would actually go and say it. But then again, considering that he's the one who actually goes out and about and interviewing people in Bikini Bottom, and he would be the one who would be in the action, maybe if there's enough chaos that is going on at Bikini Bottom, then he would be in a position where he would go and swear. So I feel like, yeah, maybe his F-bombs are probably rare, but they're more likely than the realistic news anchor. So I'm going to go and put him in the middle as well. I think he will go right over here. If it can, okay, there we go. Like, there's a little bit of a delay going on because, well, my computer is doing several things at the same time where it needs to go and register that, oh yeah, okay, let's put the character here. Okay, so the next one I gotta say is a weird addition. This is Ryan's doing, not me, but he decided, considering that, well, I guess technically it is a popular SpongeBob character, he decided to add the jellyfish. Yes, I guess, well, since we have Gary here, we might as well also go and put in the jellyfish, considering that it has appeared in many SpongeBob episodes, and there are some where it could be the prominent character of that moment. But then again, it's a jellyfish. It can never actually speak. It can only communicate through buzzing. And maybe there are some moments where, like, maybe the jellyfish would want to go and actually drop the F-bomb if it wants to go and swear. But then again, if it has that mood to go and swear, it would just express it by stinging people, you know? Like, if it's ever upset or anything like that, it could easily have its revenge just by shocking people with its stingers. In a way, it doesn't need to go and swear because it has alternatives to express its anger or to express how it is upset. So honestly, I think, yeah, it easily goes right in the bottom right over here. So yeah, I think with jellyfish, it can legally cannot, it legally cannot say F. All right, so the next one that we have over here is actually SpongeBob's parents. And actually, let me just double check if, okay, yeah, so it is actually both of them at the same time. So we got SpongeBob's parents over here. And honestly, I feel like with those two, considering that they have raised a good egg, I'm sure that they have raised SpongeBob very well. And maybe SpongeBob would, like, forget some of those lessons and stuff like that. But I'm sure they would go and talk about that when it comes to swearing, they would tell him not to go and do so. And I think, honestly, this is a case where you just look at how SpongeBob is, and you know these are good parents. You know they raised a nice boy. And I'm sure that when it comes to foul language, when it comes to swearing, and especially when it comes to dropping the F-bomb, they easily are very well aware to just say no. So honestly, it's about time we will add some cartoon characters in this ranking over here. I'm sure these are characters who absolutely would not go and say the F word under any circumstances, especially when they are with their boy. And speaking of SpongeBob's family, let's also bring up SpongeBob's grandma. And I feel like with SpongeBob's grandma, well, I'm really going to make this short because it's pretty much the same arguments that I've done with SpongeBob's parents, where she's a sweet old lady. She loves her family. She loves SpongeBob, and she knows better than to actually go and swear. And no matter who would be present, rather if it is with SpongeBob or maybe with other characters like Patrick or Squidward, she would show them kindness. She would show them love. So in that regards, she's pretty much in the same spot as SpongeBob's parents, where, like, she would refuse to say it. Like, she knows better than to actually go and swear. All right, the next one on our list is Squilliam Fancy Son. And this is pretty much who Squidward wants to be. This is the Squidward who has the fame, the glory, and the adoration. Like, Squilliam has the life that Squidward wishes that he has.
I'm the leader of a big fancy band now, and we're supposed to play the Bubble Bowl next week.
And in that regard right there, this is where the example that I brought up, that if things go well for Squidward, he wouldn't be the kind that would go and regularly swear. But then again, like, he is the kind that would really want to go and show off, especially towards Squidward. So in that regards, I do feel like maybe there are some points that he would go and actually burst out the F word just out of spite, or, you know, just to show off or express his superiority. So I feel like with Squilliam, it's kind of like possible that you can actually see him swear and drop the F-bomb. So I feel like he would be, like, over here, not as much as Squidward, but would be the kind that, you know, with his selfishness, with his narcissism, that he would probably drop a few F-bombs at times. All right, now the next one we have is Mr. Krabs' mother. And with Mr. Krabs' mother, I feel like, yeah, like, she is an old lady, similar to SpongeBob's grandmother, but in this case here, she is a little bit more strict. And she would be the kind that she would be upset if she heard the F-bomb. If she actually heard someone swearing, well, then she would actually go and punish them, regardless if it is like Mr. Krabs or if it is SpongeBob and Patrick. So in that regards, I feel like, yeah, she would refuse to say it, and she would refuse for anyone else to go and say it. So she deserves a spot right next to SpongeBob's grandma. Oh, but the next one we have here, in terms of swearing, this is the opposite of what I just talked about with Mr. Krabs' mother. This is Bubble Bass, who is the polar opposite of Patchy, where Patchy is the fun-loving, good fanboy that SpongeBob fans would like to be. Bubble Bass is the toxic fanboy that everybody should avoid of becoming. Bubble Bass is basically that kind of guy who is so entitled and so cynical with the kind of fanboyism that he has.
The best there is? I don't think so. You lose.
Like, this is the kind of person who would unironically buy a Twitter check mark, and he would think that it's like a badge of honor, while everyone else would go and completely ridicule him for being an absolute idiot to go and actually buy a Twitter check mark. But also at the same time, in terms of swearing, yeah, he would be the kind who regularly would. As a toxic fanboy, he would be the kind that, again, he would jump onto Twitter and would rant at anything and anything that would inconvenience him. If there's like an episode of a show that, you know, that bothered him in some way, he would go and throw out a massive rant and throw out all of his emotions onto that one post right over there. Like, he basically, even with his physical shape, like, this is basically what you would expect from someone who would keep on complaining about woke culture and stuff like that. So in that regards, yeah, Bubble Bass would easily be the kind who would regularly say F just out of his petty entitlement, because, like, he is that kind of loser who would just keep on repeating the F word, or at least, like, especially in terms of a desperate attempt of trying to be taken seriously. So if there is a little moral with this little moment here, regardless of which fandom that you are in, never be someone like Bubble Bass. If you want to be taken seriously, then just don't be like that. You know, don't be a Bubble Bass, be a Patchy. All right, now the next character that we have here is Flat, who is determined to go and kick SpongeBob's butt because he is the typical school bully. And as the typical school bully, of course, he gives no Fs if he would go and actually drop the F-bomb. Like, that's the only time if he would go and actually give an F. It would be verbally. And he would honestly be the kind that if you would tell him not to go and swear, well, he would go and kick your butt. So in that regards, I think it's easy to go and put him right on top where, yeah, he would regularly go and swear. In fact, he's the kind of character that if he does swear, he would go and dare you to do something about it. All right, for the next batch of characters that we have here, we have some of the background characters. The ones who would go and pop up from time to time. Maybe they don't necessarily have a name, but their presence are known in SpongeBob. Such is the case with this character here, who is often known as Fred. And with Fred, if there is one thing that we do know about him is actually his leg. And apparently it is very sensitive, where no matter what the inconvenience may come to him, no matter if he's like in an accident or if any damage has been done to him, it's always in regards to his leg. In fact, his leg is so famous that later on in SpongeBob's history, they actually did an episode completely dedicated to his leg. And in that regards, I could imagine that maybe he would go and swear from time to time. He kind of has a similar luck like Squidward, where, yeah, it would often be pretty bad and his leg would be screwed up.
Rev up those fryers, because I am sure hungry for one. Help! Help! My leg!
But I feel like, you know, his life is not filled with misery where he would go and swear all the time. He wouldn't be the kind that would always express F my life. It would just be when his leg would hurt. So in that regards, I feel like he would be like not necessarily at the top. He would just be right over here with how many times that his leg gets hurt. He would be in a pretty solid spot where I'm sure at some point his leg hurts so bad where he actually dropped a few F-bombs from time to time. So I feel like he would be right over here. Like, he would never normally go and say it, but he definitely has at some points because of how much his leg hurts. All right, the next one that we have here is this guy. And I don't know why it's specifically him, but out of all the background characters, like out of all the no-named Bikini Bottom residents, it's always this guy that the show goes for whenever they want an angry person in SpongeBob. If they want someone to be upset, to be angry, they always go with this bluefin guy. Like, every memorable moment that he would have, it's always him being angry. Rather it be about talking to Mr. Krabs with his big meaty claws, or if he would go and rally up an angry mob to go and beat up an old man. Every time we see him, he's usually angry. So in that regards, I feel like it would be best to put him right at the top. And I don't know, like maybe it could be a debate if maybe he would be more likely, even compared to Mr. Krabs, if he would be the kind that would regularly say F the most. I don't know, like maybe there is like a determining factor. But I always feel like it's so weird that every time this guy is on in SpongeBob, he always has some kind of anger issue. All right, now the next one that we have here is Dr. Gill. And Dr. Gill, often whenever you would go and see him, he's always calm, he's always pretty cool, and he's always a professional, you know? Like, he's a doctor, he knows what he's doing, and it's extremely rare to see him break from that collected Dr. Nature. So I feel like he's a bit more in a similar spot like with the news anchor, where maintaining his doctor appearance is more important than anything else. And it's not every day that you would see him in a position where he would actually go and legitimately swear. So honestly, I would actually put him over here where he would be the kind that would refuse to say it. I think his priority is to make sure that his patients are better or that his patients would pay the bills more so than to actually drop the F-bomb. And now the next one that we have on our list is this guy, where I remember like every time you would see him, he would always be more happy. He would be the kind that he would be like, always cheerful, always there to have fun and stuff like that. You know, very rarely would you ever see him in a position where he would be angry and that he would be upset to the point where he would go and say F or anything like that. I feel like it's kind of a moment where it would be pretty rare, but then again, I wouldn't say he would not swear in the first place. Again, he's just like a regular citizen of Bikini Bottom, so maybe there are some points that he would, but I feel like honestly with this guy, he would be right in the middle. Like, I wouldn't say that it's impossible for him to go and say it, but maybe there might be some times he would. But, you know, like, I feel like he's less likely than some of the others to go and actually drop the F-bomb. Oh, but then when it comes to this guy, however, oh, I think that's a little bit of a different story. Now, unlike the bluefin guy who would always be angry, I feel like with him, he doesn't get mad as much. Like, you do see a wide range of emotions with this guy whenever he is on and stuff like that. But he can certainly have his episodes where he would go and not only be upset, but he would go ballistically mad. Like, debatably, in terms of the quality of the anger, this is the one who would go and really explode the most. This is especially the case if you ever bring up chocolate to him, then he would suddenly go absolutely insane.
Chocolate! Chocolate!
So in that regards, yeah, we have seen him definitely get mad, and I'm sure there have been at some points he would definitely go and drop the F-bomb. So in that regards, I'm just going to put him a little bit lower than the bluefin guy, where I would put him right over here, where he wouldn't swear as much, but he would definitely have a sailor mouth for sure. All right, now the next ones that we have here, we actually have a couple of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's villains, and we're going to start things off with the Dirty Bubble. Now, I'm just going to say now that when it comes to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's villains, they're a lot more like the traditional villains that you would find in the Adam West Batman series. You know, they're more they're like the traditional sense of villains, but they still maintain a bit of a family-friendly approach where there is a bit of silliness, but they're also evil at the same time, where like they would embrace their evilness. And when it comes to the Dirty Bubble, I feel like he's a bit more casual, where I would feel like in terms of the villains of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, he's probably the ones that maybe he would most likely go and swear. But in terms of if he would, it would be kind of rare though. Especially if it would be the F-bomb. So I feel like, honestly, I would put him in the middle where he would if he desired. I don't know. I just feel like maybe this is a bit of a hot take, but it's hard for me to imagine the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy villains actually just swearing or suddenly dropping the F-bomb. Even at their angriest, they wouldn't necessarily be the kind that would go and just full-on swear. And that is especially the case with Man Ray, who I personally feel like is the most traditional of the classic cartoon villains. Like, with his mannerisms, with the way that he would go and approach his villainy, he would be the kind that, for sure, he would not go and actually swear. Like, this is the kind that he would reserve his swear words to just be things like drat or curses and stuff like that.
Now let me out of here, or you'll suffer dire consequences.
Well, that's good enough for me.
So in that regards, I feel like, honestly, he would go and refuse to say it, and he would just stick with those classic villainous type of swears. I think Man Ray would be the kind that he would totally go and just stick to the classics instead of just going rogue and suddenly drop the F-bomb, even if he would be at his angriest. All right, so going back to the Bikini Bottom residents, we do have this guy as well, who I personally feel like is one of the more clueless residents out there. I feel like he's the kind of citizen that doesn't fully register or doesn't register as quickly in terms of what is going on. Like, he would be the kind of guy whom his reaction may be a little bit slow, but it's not bombastic. Like, anything that would inconvenience him, he would just be like the kind that would be like, hey, why would you go and do that? So in that regards, I'm not saying that he would never go and swear, but I feel like his chances are much lower than some of the other people in Bikini Bottom. So in that regards, I'm just going to go and put him in the middle. I think that's always the safest bet. All right, now the next ones we have here are the anchovies, and they're more unique in terms of the civilians in Bikini Bottom, because it's rare that you would legitimately see them actually be verbal. And I mean, there have been a few instances where they can be, but for the most part, when they are present, they're pretty much like the SpongeBob equivalent of Beaker. Like, they would just meep around whenever they would appear. And that is especially the case with the first episode, Help Wanted, where suddenly they would just crowd up the Krusty Krab. And that's all that they would just say. It's just... So in that regards, I think honestly, I'm just gonna put them at the bottom, where it's pretty much the same reason as to, oh, wait a minute. Oh, they're, okay, suddenly, oh, they're different ones? Okay, so, okay, I thought they're like a pair for some reason. I thought it would be like with SpongeBob's parents, but yeah, honestly, I don't know. Like, they're the same thing. They're rarely verbal, so yeah, I'm also gonna put the other one here. So basically, they legally cannot say F. It's the same reason as to why Gary and the jellyfish cannot actually drop the F-bomb. All right, now the next one that we have here, we're going to go back to some villainy, and we are going to be talking about Doodle Bob. And with Doodle Bob, I am aware that there are a few more appearances that he would go and do in some of the later episodes of SpongeBob, but I'm specifically going to be talking about his first and most prominent appearance. And in terms of that one, Doodle Bob cannot communicate in a common language. Like, he has his own way of communication. Like, he would just go around and say, like, and in that regard, even if he would want to go and say the F word, he couldn't actually go and say it. So in that regards, I think, just like with what I've talked about with the anchovies, he legally cannot say it. You know, he has his own way of speaking, and in his vocabulary, he cannot go and actually say F. Okay, so for the next one here, I don't know if Ryan did this as a joke, but this is possibly the most joke character that we have on our list, or debatably the most joke character in the history of SpongeBob. And what I'm talking about is Nosferatu. No joke, Ryan decided he's just gonna go and add freaking Nosferatu on this entire list. And the funny thing with this Nosferatu in particular, I'm not gonna be talking about how he is in the movie. I am specifically talking about how he is in that one episode where you just see him flickering the lights on and off. And in that regards, I don't really see him swearing. Like, honestly, I don't really see him, like, speaking at all. He would just be the kind of guy that, honestly, if he would legitimately communicate, he would go and just giggle. You know, he would just throw out these, like, funny little giggles that would seem out of character, but would be very much in place for this version in particular. So, honestly, I think he just legally cannot say it. And honestly, I'm still trying to register the fact that Ryan actually added freaking Nosferatu, or especially the fact that technically Nosferatu is a legitimate SpongeBob character. And speaking of which, this is actually a character that I added onto this list, considering that if we are going to add Nosferatu, I figured, why don't we go and also add the hash-slinging slasher, or at least the person that SpongeBob and Squidward thought was the hash-slinging slasher. And yeah, like, you would think that with his threatening appearance at first, you would think maybe he would be the kind that, yeah, he would swear as he would be slashing. But in actuality, once you get to know the guy, he seems actually pretty cool. He seems like the kind of guy that you would like, yeah, he has a very dorky image, but it's like very relatably dorky. It's the kind that, like, for someone like me, I could easily vibe with him. Like, you know, the kind that you would want to go and play Mario Kart or Smash Bros with, and you can most likely have a great time. And in that regards, like, you know, he seems pleasant. He seems very nice. I don't really see him swearing. So honestly, I'm just going to put him over here where he would refuse saying F. I don't really see the guy actually saying the F word or anything like that. He just seems like a pleasant guy to go and hang out with. However, I cannot say the same about our next character, which is the Tattletale Strangler. And I feel like he is a combination of Flats and Plankton, where he's basically the combination of a villain and a bully. Like, you know, he would want to kick SpongeBob's butt, but that is not all. He would want to eliminate SpongeBob for good. And in that regards, it's like, it's safer to go and, to go and say to Flats, don't swear, than it is to the Tattletale Strangler, because I mean, I know Flats is going to kick your butt for it, but your chances of survival are much higher than with the Tattletale Strangler. So in that regards, yeah, he would definitely be on top of the list. Like, you don't really want to mess with him or say anything about it if he would go and actually swear. And then with our next character, we have another major fan favorite, and that is the very old lady. Now, I know that with many of the senior characters that I've talked about, like with Mermaid Man or with Mr. Krabs' mom or SpongeBob's grandma, they would not be the kind who would want to go and swear. In fact, they would be the kind who would be offended if you would swear in front of them. This is not the case with this old lady. This is a lady whom her crankiness has been put to the max. This would be the kind of old woman where she would go and just commonly swear because she just doesn't comprehend. Like, she does confused as Mermaid Man, but with her vocabulary, it would be almost nothing but swears.
You just can't wait for me to die, can you?
So in that regards, oh hell yeah, you bet she's gonna be right on top of that list for sure. She would, she would be like right up there with Mr. Krabs and Bubble Bass and Potty for the character in SpongeBob who would be the most likely to commonly go and drop the F-bomb. And then the next one we have on our list is Kevin the Sea Cucumber. And I feel like with Kevin, he is honestly pretty interesting. Like, what Squilliam is to Squidward, I feel like Kevin is to Bubble Bass. The kind that Bubble Bass wants to be this guy where he is a lot more accomplished, but he still maintains a lot of that entitlement. Very much similar to Squilliam in a way. And in that regards, I guess, it's very much like I would put in the same arguments of Squilliam and put the same with Kevin, where he would just swear mainly based out of entitlement because of how prominent he is in the jellyfishing community and that he is this very well-respected figure, but he's also very much a bit of a selfish narcissist. So in that regards, yeah, he would say F, but more out of entitlement, where I'm sure he doesn't do it all the time, but I'm sure he would have his episodes where he would go and swear. Okay, so the next one that we have on our list is going to be a very interesting one. We have the nematodes. In a way, you can argue that they are creatures, very similar to jellyfish or anchovies or snails and stuff like that. But in the case of anchovies, they do have a prominent, comprehensible vocabulary. When they want something, they will go and actually say it. If they're hungry, they will say they're hungry. If they're thirsty, they will say they are thirsty.
Walking. Hungry.
So in that regards, would they be able to actually say F? Honestly, I would say maybe. Like, if there's an extermination crew that would come in to go and wipe out the nematodes so that they won't be a problem, then at that point, I can imagine maybe they would go and say it. So honestly, I would put them in the middle because I feel like their case would be very circumstantial. Like, it's rare for them to go and say it because they would only focus on one thing and just say that one thing. But if they're in a position where their lives are being threatened, then yeah, I think they would go and actually say it. And then the next one that we have on our list is Bubble Buddy. Now, I know with Bubble Buddy, a lot of people would say that, well, technically Bubble Buddy would never go and actually talk. So you could just put it at the bottom of the list where he legally cannot say F. But then again, keep in mind that right at the end of the episode, we suddenly hear Bubble Buddy actually talking and expressing his personality. And honestly, I know this is like a very old-timey thing to say, but I feel like Bubble Buddy is a very swell fellow. This is a guy, he just wants to go and have a good time. He appreciates the fun moments that he had with SpongeBob. So in that regards, he would not be the kind that would go and swear. He's very well-mannered. He's very nice. He seems very pleasant to be with. So I'm going to put him where he would refuse to say it. He knows better than to actually go and swear or to even say the F word. All right, we're almost at the end, but for our last few characters here, we actually have some of the movie characters. And with our first one, we are going to be looking at King Neptune again. But more specifically, though, we are going to be looking into the movie version of King Neptune, because one of the weirdest things about SpongeBob is that somehow we have two versions of King Neptune, where we have the one voiced by John O'Hurley in the show, and then there's the one in the first movie where they decided to make a character that is completely different. And I would say that this King Neptune has some similarities and differences to the John O'Hurley version. With this King Neptune, yeah, he has that same arrogance. He has that same entitlement. However, he is more short-tempered than the John O'Hurley version. Like, he's the kind that would easily get upset, and that if you would inconvenience him in any way possible, then you know that you would be doomed. Like, he would sentence you to go to the dungeon, or even worse, execution just right then and there, just immediately. That he would use his trident to go and, like, wipe out whoever would go and upset him.
No! I won't let you!
Very well, then.
I'll have to fry you both.
And in that regards, I wouldn't say he would go and swear all the time, but I would say a bit more than the King Neptune in the show. So that's why I'm going to go and put him right over here, where he's not at the top, but I'm sure with his temper, he has said it at some point. And speaking of the movie Neptune, we also have his daughter Mindy, which I honestly gotta say that as I grew older, I just have to state that looking back at the scenes with Mindy in the movie, and I see how Patrick would go and react to her, like just full on head over heels over Mindy, I just gotta say that, yeah, I get it. I understand, like, the appeal and the charm with Mindy, because she's very much like a combination of Velma from Scooby-Doo and Ariel from The Little Mermaid. Like, she has a very appealing look, like a nice body, but at the same time, unapologetically a geek, and has a very sweet and lovely personality to boot. But we're not here to go and simp for Mindy. We're here to go and ask if she would go and actually swear or not. And honestly, considering that she is a bit more of a geeky type, especially compared to Pearl, she would not be the kind who would go and actually swear. But considering that she would have to go and deal with her short-tempered father, I feel like maybe she would have her times where she would want to go and belt out the F word. So honestly, it's kind of similar to Sandy in a way, where it's rare, but she would be in situations where she definitely could. So I feel like she would be right in the middle, where she definitely can say the F word if she desires to do so, but normally she would not. And then our next one we have here is Dennis, the hitman in the first movie. And I would say with him, the arguments that I've done with the Tattletale Strangler would be the same thing with him. He's the kind of guy that you just do not want to mess with. And he seems like he has that personality where he definitely would go and actually drop some F-bombs from time to time. But if you tell him, hey, don't do that, well then say goodbye to your life right there. So I think with Dennis, yeah, let's just put him right on top. In fact, I'm actually going to put him right next to the Tattletale Strangler, because it would honestly make sense to have, like, the two dangerous criminals be right next to each other on the top of that list. Okay, so the next one that we have here is David Hasselhoff. Now, I'm not going to go and say David Hasselhoff in general, like the person himself, like he is in real life, or how he is on set, like in his movies and shows or whatever. I'm just going to be focusing specifically on how he is in the first movie, where he would heroically come in and he would save SpongeBob and Patrick to go and send them back to Bikini Bottom. And in that regards, I feel like that David Hasselhoff, he is pretty much what Mermaid Man was back during his prime. But I will say though, like, even though his appearance is small, I do feel like I know there is one instance where he would probably most likely swear. And that is like with the little gag where suddenly you see this massive explosion happen right underneath him where like he's just relaxing and then suddenly he just got blasted.
You done good, Hasselhoff. You done. Ow.
And in that regards, I could see like maybe he would just go and throw out a little swear. So in that case, he would not go and say F, but just for that one instance, like he would, you know, I would have put him like he would refuse to say it, but like I'm just gonna put him right in the middle. Like that little blast that he received, like that is his one moment where he could go and say it, and like, yeah, we understand why he would drop that F-bomb. And then the next one that we have here is the Cyclops, the one character who nearly full-on took down SpongeBob and Patrick. Like, if it weren't for that sprinkler system, SpongeBob and Patrick would be full-on done for, and they would be turned into little gift shop merchandise. But the thing with this Cyclops here, he doesn't normally communicate. It's very similar to Doodlebob, where he doesn't necessarily have a full-on comprehensible vocabulary. I mean, yeah, like he did say uh-oh at one point, but he wouldn't be the kind who would actually communicate with others normally. So I think with that said, I would just go and put him similarly to Doodlebob, where he would just be right over here, where he legally cannot say F because he would mostly communicate through grunting and stuff like that. All right, so moving on to the second movie with Sponge Out of Water, we got the Antonio Banderas pirate Burger Beard. And in terms of him, considering that, like, one thing you have to emphasize is that he is a Antonio Banderas pirate. And as a pirate, of course, they're gonna go and commonly swear. Like, I would put him, like, technically in the same leagues as, like, some of the other villains who are in the top of the list, like, Dennis or, the Tattletale Strangler.
All right, you feather rat. Time to shove off!
But he does run his own burger shop, and when it comes to selling burgers, that's when he has to control himself and not actually go and swear. Like, he would go and actually be nice and friendly to the customers who want to go and buy his burgers with the Krabby Patty secret formula that he stole. So in that regards, he's not going to be at the top, but I will put him where it's for sure he has said it at some point, where you're not going to hear him full on swear, but I'm sure at some point with his pirate nature, he would actually say the F word for sure. All right, so the next one that we have is Bubbles. And with Bubbles, I feel like it's a bit of an interesting type where I would say he has the same kind of regal personality as the King Neptunes, but in terms of those noble types of characters, he would not be the one to go and commonly swear. He would be a bit more collected and maybe not have that much of a temper. But with that said, considering that he's he's checking in on the universe to make sure that everything is going fine with all the galaxies and stuff like that, I'm sure there have been some inconveniences that would have him to go and swear.
You were supposed to...
So in that regards, I'm just going to put him right in the middle where, yeah, I can imagine he would go and actually say it, but he's not going to be the kind who would go and just belt out the F word as commonly as some of the other godlike characters in SpongeBob. And then when we jump onto the third movie, which is Sponge on the Run, speaking of regal characters, we actually have Poseidon. I guess they decided to go and give King Neptune a break and decided to go with another royal godlike figure to be in SpongeBob. And with this one, I feel like maybe he's not as short-tempered as either of the King Neptunes, but he's definitely a lot more narcissistic. Like, this is a guy who's just really full of himself. In fact, this is what happens if Squilliam is part of legitimate royalty.
You're telling me there are no more snails?
There are no more snails.
And you're confident of that?
Relatively confident.
So from there, I can imagine he definitely would go and swear, especially with his bratty attitude, but it wouldn't necessarily be all the time. So in that regards, I'm just going to put him like where Squilliam also is as well, where he probably would swear off saying F, but he probably has said it at some points. And then finally, we have our last character, which is Otto, the robot that Sandy has created originally for the Krusty Krab, but then suddenly would find himself tagged along in SpongeBob and Patrick's Little Adventure that he would have in that third movie. And honestly, I will admit, my memory of Otto is a little bit fuzzy. Like, he's not really that memorable of a character and not that memorable in the movie in the first place. So honestly, just trying to remember from the scenes where he was, I guess it really all depends if Sandy would go and actually program him to actually swear, to actually drop some F-bombs, or to go and communicate in that kind of way. But I don't know, I feel like it would be kind of iffy. But in this case, like, the safest bet would be right in the middle. Like, I don't think Otto would, but if he would legitimately swear, then honestly, like, yeah, maybe it could happen. And that should do it for our special tier list of which SpongeBob characters are most or least likely to say F. And I gotta say that I'm actually pretty surprised with how well balanced this list actually is. I mean, yeah, sure, there are a bit more characters who would say F more so than not, but still though, it feels like with this entire list, it almost feels like it's pretty equal with how it is all distributed. And I gotta say, it definitely was a lot of fun looking back at many of these characters and discussing about their personalities and if they would legitimately drop the F-bomb or not. And if you all had a great time with this entire tier list, then don't forget to go and like this video. And hey, why not subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet? And with all that said and done, also, again, I want to give a special thanks to Ryan Walterson for creating this tier list for me. And also, happy 25th anniversary to SpongeBob SquarePants. I've had a lot of fond memories of the show, and may your Krabby Patties still be as delicious as they first were when you were first hired at the Krusty Krab. And with all that said, I would like to go and say thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes!
You said number